what was the company's stance
Oh,
or perspective or messaging around what we're talking about before you came out to them?
I don't really think that there was anything specific to do with the trans um, identity
Mhm.
or inclusivity, really. But I think that hospitality is such a welcoming environment that I probably could have, if I were to relive my time at Fairmont, come out a lot sooner. Um, but really, it was just maybe a struggle that I had internally.
Mhm.
But
Rather than
for
getting
my
pushed to it.
right, exactly. And I think that's something that I've really tried to change in my involvement with the DNI committee is to really create a safe space where people can be a little bit more forthcoming.
Mhm.
And that goes from everything from our documents, which is a huge hurdle for people, to just physically entering spaces.
Mhm.
Because from a colleague perspective, you really are just given two options. You're given two uniforms to choose from, and whatever it says on your identification, that's really what you're propelled to.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point. I mean, then I remember Daniel and I talking about this, that you don't, when you're in a senior leadership position, you, a lot of times there's no policy in place
Mhm.
until you're forced to put a policy in place for something that was never really in your frame of reference
Right.
for good, bad, or indifferent, whatever, however you want to look at it.
Mhm.
And I'm curious to know, after that conversation with human resources, how long did it take between that conversation and things with a DNI committee to really gel and come together?
Well, it had been a year from me having that moment and coming out. It had been a year to when I was actually invited to the DNI community. And I, it, when I spoke to Daniel at the time, it wasn't really, it was still kind of getting its footing.
Mhm.
Um, but for myself, it really came to maybe bi-weekly meetings with human resources. And just, I know in hospitality, things take a little bit longer um, to come into fruition. But for myself, I was physically facing everyday struggles. And
Mhm.
so every day it was not getting easier. And so it really was having conversations with my human resources team and hotel management team. And I think something that I learned from my conversation, and I was quite surprised about, was no one was ever saying no to me. No one was ever denying my existence or not saying that they wanted to include me, but that they were waiting. You know, you're kind of waiting for someone to tell you these things.
Mm.
And so for a trans person who is just coming out and, you know, asking for these spaces that my other colleagues readily have access to, you know, like it all comes down to a human resources manager or someone in management saying, oh, well, if I knew, or if someone does need a uniform in another department, we'll provide that to them. I'm like,
Mhm.
well, no, it should be provided from the start.
Right, right. Rather than putting the onus on the other person, the company needs to be proactive about that.
Exactly. And it's all down to really like problems with disclosure. And that goes between colleagues and guests. And when I talk about disclosure, I mean, even to this day in the hotel, we automatically go towards gendered pronouns and gendered language for all of our guests.
Mhm.
So it's not even a colleague perspective at that point. It's even from a guest perspective.
Mhm.
Um, and basically just waiting for that guest to disclose their own pronouns and disclose how they like to be addressed instead of from the get-go asking them or
Mhm.
asking everyone.
You're right. And that actually, that was a pretty eye-opening conversation you and I had as we were setting up
Mhm.
this whole interview today. Even just, I think it's so easy to get, and I don't want to go down a rabbit hole yet, because I
No,
have
no,
some
yeah.
other questions about this, but I think it's so easy to just to sort of get in your head about not knowing how to address somebody, especially if you've been with a company like Fairmont forever. You've just been sort of indoctrinated into how to address people, right? That's
Right.
just, you've sort of pounded into your head for years and years.
Yeah.
And it's literally just as easy as asking somebody how they like to be addressed.
That's so easy.
So easy, right?
It's so easy. And like, there are some things that really just slip up, like common sayings like, hey guys, things like that, or like, hey ladies, good morning ladies. But really it's just a learning opportunity, and we're all here to grow.